What would you do if you woke up to find that the HOA was planning to take over your backyard and turn it into a parking lot without asking for your permission? That's the kind of question you might think could never happen, but let me tell you, it's exactly the kind of thing that happens when Karen from the HOA shows up at your door. I never thought a simple pool party could cause so much trouble, but when Karen, clipboard in hand, knocked on my door telling me I was breaking rules on my own property, I knew things were about to get out of hand. It all started with what seemed like a perfect day. The sun was out, the pool was sparkling like something out of a magazine, and the music was just loud enough to set the perfect vibe. My friends and I had been planning this small backyard gathering for weeks. It wasn't a rager, just a few burgers on the grill, kids splashing in the pool, and some good tunes to welcome the summer. Nothing too crazy, just a relaxing, fun day at my house. Everything was going according to plan. The kids were running around with water guns, a couple of beers were cooling in the shade, and my buddy Mike was manning the grill. The vibe was perfect. And then, as if the universe decided it had been too nice to me, there she was, Karen from the HOA. She stood at the door like a thundercloud, clipboard in hand, ready to rain on my parade. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice as cold as the clipboard she was holding. "I'm here to inform you that your pool party is in violation of HOA rules." I stared at her, blinking in disbelief. "Excuse me? My pool party?" I said, trying to process what she was saying. This was my property, my day, and she was acting like I'd broken some unspoken law just for having a few friends over. Karen didn't waste any time. She looked me up and down, like she was about to declare me guilty of some grand offense, and her tone was as official as a police officer giving out a ticket. "Yes, your pool party," she reiterated, like I was somehow too dense to understand. "It's too loud, there are too many cars parked outside your house, and you don't have the proper permits to host an event like this. I'm going to have to ask you to shut it down immediately." I felt a laugh escape before I could stop it. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, almost amused. "This is a private party. I'm on my own property, Karen. You can't just waltz in here and tell me what to do." Her face didn't move a muscle. She was stone cold, like she had a script she was reading from, and nothing I said was going to deviate her from it. "I'm afraid the HOA has rules. And you're in violation of several of them. If you don't comply immediately, we'll have no choice but to fine you. I'll also need to call enforcement to take further action if necessary." The audacity of it hit me all at once. Here I was, on my own property, and she was threatening me with fines and enforcement like she was some sort of ruler with absolute power. I wasn't having it. "Oh, I don't think you quite understand," I said, trying to stay calm, though every word was laced with frustration. "This is my property. I have every right to host a private gathering without some stranger telling me I need to shut it down. If anyone should be enforcing anything, it's going to be you and your ridiculous rules." Karen's response was mechanical, like she was used to getting her way. She pulled out a thick stack of papers from her bag, all labeled with HOA guidelines, and handed them to me with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "These are the HOA's rules. You're violating several sections. I strongly advise you to read them, or I'll be forced to escalate the situation." I glanced down at the papers. I had no intention of reading them. The absurdity of it all was too much. "You can take those rules and shove them," I said bluntly, not even bothering to glance back at her. "I'm not shutting down my party, and I'm definitely not going to waste my time reading your little handbook. You can take that fine, Anne." Before I could finish my sentence, I slammed the door in her face. It was a bold move, but I wasn't going to let her keep standing there, trying to make me feel guilty for doing absolutely nothing wrong. I stood on the other side of the door, breathing deeply, trying to calm the anger boiling inside me. But as I peeked through the window, I saw Karen standing on my front porch, tapping her clipboard like she was waiting for me to come crawling back. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not now, not ever. I reached for my phone and dialed Mike's number. "Mike, you won't believe this," I said when he picked up, trying to keep my voice steady, but the frustration was clear. "The HOA is trying to shut down my pool party." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a laugh. "Are you serious? What happened? Did the neighbor's cat get stuck in a tree again?" I could feel my annoyance rising. "Worse. Karen from the HOA showed up and is claiming my party is too loud, and that I don't have a permit. Apparently, having more than 2 cars in my driveway is also a violation. And get this, she's threatening to fine me and call enforcement if I don't shut it down." "Wait a second, what? Are you telling me you're getting fined for having a barbecue in your own backyard?" Mike asked incredulously. "Yep," I replied, barely holding it together. "And apparently, this is just the beginning. She's got all these rules she's waving around, and she seems to think she can just barge in and dictate what I do on my own property. Man, that's insane. But don't worry, I've got your back," Mike said, his voice laced with confidence. "You need help? I'll be there in 5. Mike had always been the kind of guy who made light of even the most stressful situations. Right now, I needed that humor to keep me from losing it entirely. "Bring the grill," I told him, grinning at the thought of our showdown. "We're not backing down. Not now." I hung up and walked back to the backyard, my mind racing with how I could deal with Karen. As I passed the patio, I saw my friends still hanging out, enjoying the party, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside. The kids were still splashing in the pool, the grill was sizzling, and the music was just loud enough to keep the mood light but not offensive. And yet, there she was again, Karen, pacing at the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, probably hoping I'd cave in and beg her to let me continue my peaceful gathering. I stared at her from the window, grinding my teeth in frustration. She wasn't going to win this. I needed to be smart about this. Karen wasn't going to back down easily, and I had to outwit her. She was just waiting for me to make the wrong move, to let my anger take over. But I had a feeling that's exactly what she wanted. She thought she could bully me into submission, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I wasn't just fighting for my right to have fun, I was fighting to take back my property from a person who thought she could control everything. As I turned back toward the house, something clicked. I remembered reading about HOA laws before, about the limits of their power. Karen and the HOA couldn't just invade private property without a real reason. I didn't have to argue with her, I just needed to know the right rules to turn the tables on her. That was my edge. I walked inside and grabbed my laptop, already knowing the first thing I'd search. It was time to take control of the situation. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. I sat down at my kitchen table, the laptop in front of me, determined to figure out how to make Karen and her HOA nonsense disappear. The first step was to get my facts straight. I didn't want to be one of those people who argued without knowing what I was talking about. I needed to have the right information, something concrete to hold up against Karen's so-called rules. I pulled up the HOA's website and started combing through their bylaws and guidelines. It wasn't long before I found the sections she'd mentioned: noise complaints, permits for gatherings, and parking limitations. But the more I read, the more I realized something. A lot of this stuff was vague, full of language that gave Karen a lot of room to interpret things however she liked. Still, I wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. I needed more specifics, something I could use to counter her claims. After an hour of digging through documents, I stumbled across something crucial, a clause hidden deep within the zoning laws that outlined exactly what the HOA could, and more importantly, could not, control. The key point was simple: private gatherings on private property were exempt from most of the HOA's noise regulations and permit requirements unless they were open to the public or had a direct impact on public safety. In other words, as long as my party wasn't spilling into the streets or causing a fire hazard, the HOA had no legal right to interfere. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. This was the loophole I needed. Karen had no idea what she was messing with. I knew she'd tried to push these rules on other people before, but she'd never met anyone willing to call her bluff. Now, I had the upper hand. I quickly printed out the pages I needed, the zoning laws, the sections of the HOA guidelines that explicitly stated private events were exempt, and a few examples of past cases where HOA overreach had been challenged. I was ready to go head-to-head with her, and this time, I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my phone and texted Mike. "Bring the grill. I'm about to outsmart Karen." The response came back almost immediately, "On my way, bro. Let's shut her down for good." Mike was the kind of guy who could lighten up any situation. And right now, I needed that kind of attitude. Even though the stakes had grown higher, I couldn't help but feel a little more confident with each passing minute. I wasn't just protecting my summer party anymore. I was taking a stand against a system that was trying to trample on my rights. By the time Mike showed up, I'd gathered everything I needed. I was ready to march over to Karen and show her that her petty little power trip wasn't going to fly. He arrived carrying the grill like he was about to take part in some epic battle, his smirk almost as wide as the grill itself. "You ready for this?" he asked, clearly enjoying the absurdity of it all. "Oh, I'm more than ready," I replied, holding up the stack of papers. "We're about to turn this whole situation around." We made our way outside, and Karen was still pacing near the edge of the yard, clutching her clipboard like it was her lifeline. I could see her eyes flicker in my direction, and the smug smile that had never quite left her face twisted into something more triumphant. She probably thought I was going to fold. I walked straight up to her, feeling more certain of my steps with every inch. "Karen," I said, cutting straight to the point. "You've got no right to shut down my party. I've been looking into it, and I know the rules better than you do." She barely flinched. "Oh, I'm sure you've read your little rulebook, but the HOA is very clear on what is and isn't allowed." I handed her the printed pages without ceremony, watching as her eyes scanned over the laws and guidelines. I could see her stiffen as she realized what I was holding. "This," I said, "is the part you missed." I pointed to the section outlining the exemptions for private events. "This party is not public. It's private. According to these rules, you have no right to interfere. You can't force me to shut it down, and you can't fine me." Karen stared at the papers, her eyes narrowing as she fumbled with them in her hands. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually read it, but then she looked up at me with a sneer. "Nice try," she muttered. "But that doesn't change the fact that you're disturbing the peace." I shook my head, feeling a grin tug at the corners of my mouth. "Not only is that not true, but even if it was, the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over private gatherings unless they're causing a public safety issue. And I can guarantee this pool party isn't one of those." She tried to flip through the papers, searching for something, anything that might prove her point. But there was nothing. The power had shifted, and she knew it. Her smugness began to evaporate as she realized I was right. I stood there, watching her scramble for a response that wasn't coming. "You can't just walk in here and act like you own the place," I added, my voice steady and confident. "I'm not taking down my party. You can take those fines and your empty threats and shove them." Karen's face turned bright red. I could see her struggling to keep it together, but the more she tried to find a way out, the more frustrated she became. Finally, she muttered something under her breath and tried to walk away, her hands clutching the clipboard as though it was some sort of shield. Mike, who had been standing by with a beer in his hand, grinned. "You should really get going, Karen," he said, raising his can in a mock toast. "Don't make it worse for yourself." Karen shot him a glare that could have melted steel, but Mike wasn't fazed. She turned on her heel and stormed off toward the gate, muttering threats under her breath. "You haven't heard the last of this," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. She was beaten, and she knew it. As she disappeared down the street, I turned to Mike, who gave me a thumbs up. "Well, that was easy," he said, clearly enjoying the moment. "Let's get back to the party." With Karen gone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The tension that had been hanging in the air for hours finally evaporated. I looked around at the party, my friends by the grill, the kids back in the pool, the music still playing just loud enough, and couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. It wasn't just about winning the argument. It was about taking a stand for what was right, and in that moment, it felt pretty damn good. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, the universe decided to throw one last curveball. It was only a few hours after Karen stormed off that the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but at this point, I wasn't exactly in the mood to ignore it. I grabbed the phone, expecting maybe a friend or another neighbor wanting to check in on the party, but what I heard made my stomach drop. "Hello, is this Mr. Carter?" a voice on the other end asked. It was a calm, professional tone, completely at odds with the whirlwind of frustration and anger I'd just dealt with. "This is Officer Davis with the local police department. I'm calling about a complaint filed by Karen from your neighborhood's HOA." I leaned back, a nervous laugh escaping. "Of course," I muttered to myself, shaking my head. "What now?" "Yes, Mr. Carter, she claims you're hosting a loud and illegal event," Officer Davis continued, not missing a beat. "She alleges that you are disturbing the peace and creating a public safety concern with your pool party. We're investigating her complaint." The irony hit me like a ton of bricks. Karen, not content with forcing her ridiculous rules on me, had escalated things to the next level. Now, she was bringing in the cops as if I'd committed some sort of high-level crime. I had to bite back the laughter. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible. This is a private party, officer. It's being held on my property, and there's no noise violation or public disturbance. Everyone here is having a good time, but we're not causing any trouble." I could hear the officer pause, perhaps surprised by the calmness in my voice. "I understand your side of the story, Mr. Carter," he said after a moment, clearly weighing his options. "But I'll need to make a report. I'm not sure how much more we can do considering the complaint she's filed, but I just wanted to let you know I'm aware of the situation." I didn't even try to hold back the smirk. "Officer, I can assure you that I'm well within my rights. Karen's complaint is baseless, and I've got all the necessary documentation to back that up. I've even researched the HOA's rules. She's been pulling this kind of stunt before. She has no legal grounds to dictate what happens on my property. I'm not worried about a thing." There was a long pause on the line before Officer Davis responded with a light chuckle. "Sounds like Karen might be a bit overzealous in her complaints. I'll take a look at your side of the story. Thanks for clearing that up, Mr. Carter. I'll be sure to let her know you're not causing any issues." I could almost hear him rolling his eyes. "Good luck with the rest of your party. I'm sure the kids are having a great time." "Thanks, officer," I said, relief flooding through me. "I appreciate your understanding." I hung up, my chest swelling with satisfaction. It was clear that Karen had gone way too far this time. Not only had she tried to bully me into shutting down a harmless party, but she had also involved the police in a baseless attempt to ruin my day. And now, with the officer on my side, it felt like we'd really turned the corner. It wasn't just about fighting back, it was about exposing her for the petty, vindictive person she was. As I walked back outside, I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. Mike had been hanging out by the grill, cracking open a beer and joking around with the other guests, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding earlier. "You good?" he asked, eyeing me as I came out onto the patio. "Better than good," I replied, shaking my head. "You won't believe what just happened." I quickly filled him in on the phone call, explaining how Karen had escalated things by calling the cops and how I'd managed to talk my way out of it. Mike was grinning from ear to ear by the end of the story, clearly proud of how I'd handled it. "Man, she really thought she could mess with your party and get away with it, huh?" Mike said, still laughing. "That's the thing about people like her, they don't realize that most people aren't afraid to stand up to them. I'm just glad you got the cop on your side." "Yeah," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'm not done with her yet, though. I've got a feeling this isn't the last time she'll try to make trouble." Mike's grin widened. "Well, you'll be ready next time. This isn't over until she realizes she can't push people around with her rules anymore. You've got the law on your side now, my friend. She doesn't stand a chance." It was at that moment I realized just how much this whole ordeal had changed. Not only had I fought back, but I had outsmarted Karen at her own game. She wasn't just some uptight enforcer of meaningless rules, she was someone who had tried to ruin my day, and I'd made sure she knew it. She had lost, and I had won, by knowing the rules, by standing firm, and by refusing to be intimidated. The party continued, the energy was lighter, and the mood shifted. The kids were back in the pool, the adults were gathered around the grill, and the music played on. But something had changed in the air. There was a palpable sense of victory, like we'd all collectively stuck it to Karen in the best way possible, by enjoying ourselves and refusing to let her spoil our fun. As the evening wore on, I thought back to all the times people had just rolled over when Karen had flexed her HOA muscles. It was clear to me now, I wasn't the only one who had suffered under her reign. But that was the past. With the party still going strong, the cops out of the picture, and Karen nowhere in sight, I felt like the real victory had just begun. Mike clinked his beer against mine and gave me a wink. "We've got this, man. She won't be back." And for the first time in hours, I believed it. The rest of the evening unfolded without incident. The party continued, the energy lifting with every passing minute, now that the threat of Karen and her ridiculous rules had been put to rest. The kids splashed around in the pool, the adults enjoyed their time by the grill, and for the first time in hours, I could finally breathe without feeling like I had to watch my back. Mike was right, we'd won, and the taste of victory was sweet. But the truth was, this wasn't just about one pool party. It wasn't just about Karen trying to shut us down, it was about everything she represented. Karen was the embodiment of overreach, of people who hide behind arbitrary rules and try to control others' lives. And as I sat back in my chair, watching the sunset, I realized that the fight wasn't just mine, it was a fight that could affect every person in the neighborhood who had ever felt oppressed by the HOA or anyone who thought they had the power to dictate how others live. The next day, I sat down and thought about what had happened. It wasn't over. Karen's defeat, as sweet as it was, wasn't the final chapter in this story. I wasn't the only one who had been subjected to her overbearing control, and I knew there were others in the community who had quietly endured her wrath. It was time for them to stand up too. I reached out to a few neighbors, starting with the ones I knew had been affected by Karen's obsession with following every single HOA rule to the letter. I told them about what had happened, how I had fought back and won. The response was overwhelming. People were angry. People were ready to take back their homes and their freedom. Within a week, we had organized a community meeting. We all came together, neighbors old and new, and shared our stories about Karen's petty complaints and unjust fines. By the end of the meeting, it was clear, the HOA's power was built on fear and ignorance, and we weren't going to let them control us anymore. We voted to challenge the HOA's grip on the neighborhood, to demand changes that would give us back our rights as homeowners. Karen might have thought she was in control, but in reality, the true power was always with the people. We just had to find our voices. As the sun set that evening, I thought about all the changes that were about to take place. What started as a simple pool party had become a catalyst for something much bigger. It wasn't just about fighting Karen anymore. It was about taking a stand for freedom, for our right to live our lives without the constant threat of unreasonable rules. So, let me ask you this, have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.